walk me through your career journey as you tell it to other people?
So I've been in tech since the beginning. Essentially, I worked at Kinko's copy. I was actually studying to be an engineer at the time and walked in one day and my boss met me at the door and was like, "Hey, computers? How about desktop computing?" And I was like, "Okay, here we go, next challenge." But I think it just really showed early on both my interest in operations, in tech, and in new opportunities. And so from there, I like went into legal tech, and then I went into travel tech and personalized online advertising, and then building websites, and then mobile apps in different variety of industries. It was always like, how can I help businesses, help teams unblock, unlock, and move forward? And over time morphing into this more product and user centric experience, getting my master's in design thinking just really informed having these different perspectives. What is it that we're trying to achieve with this product? What is it that the clients are trying to achieve with this product? And how can we balance both the business profitability side of things as well as the best experience possible for all the different user bases. And I had all of these experiences of working with individuals across different cultures, across different time zones, different countries, and backgrounds, and learning different techniques to get everybody on the same page. So it all ended up naturally evolving into, as I started managing teams and leading larger teams, these tools and techniques that I was taught, I started sharing with my team. So I had very much this coaching kind of leadership style. And to where people, after we would work together, they would come back to me for career advice or mentorship. And then, yeah, as I was wrapping up my time in Germany and was in my last company, we were getting ready to sell it. I started thinking more and more about what was next on the horizon for me and just how much I really enjoyed working with people and working through them and elevating them to their next level. And so that just led to me then starting my own coaching business.
Yeah, I love when I hear people talk about this varied journey. And it's always funny to me because sometimes people will, especially in a moment of clarity, they'll come back and say, "Oh, I've had this kind of like varied career. It doesn't make any sense." And they have a lot of judgment around,
Mm.
I wish I would have been a specialist. And then we sometimes you see people who are in the specialist role and they're like, well, I only went into this one thing and now it's limiting my opportunities. I wish I would have been more general. And I'm always like, let's just step back and understand what led you to those decisions and what's the through line of it and what's the value of it that you're bringing to the table, because neither one is like good nor bad, they're different. So I'm curious for you, as you've been in so many different contexts, like different size of business, different types of products, different cultures, different locations, like in the US and Germany and elsewhere. Do you have a sense of what value might have been leading that for you, or personality or strength? What's driving those decisions for change?
Yeah, I think it's comes back to this, the my values of one is interconnectedness. So I am the big picture thinker, very systems thinker. So it's hard for me just to stay in one little space and operate within that minutia detail. I'm like, how does this influence this other thing in this other area? And I'm just curious by nature. I want to follow the thread. I want to see what everything is connected to. And I get excitement out of that and excited by the possibility of this idea of what is a constraint, like a perceived constraint versus an actual constraint, and being able to break through that and open up again to possibilities and then choose and go back down the rabbit hole and then back up again. And I think between that and this curiosity of things, it makes me laugh because I think about also my early education. Like I mentioned, I was studying engineering at one point, and then I realized I'm not an engineer by nature. Like understanding the intricacies and the details of things, I get lost in the sea of details, and then I'm just like, I want out. And I remember having a conversation with one of my advisors in university, and I explained to her what I was doing. And I had moved then into project management at the time, where I was studying and going and working at the same time. And then she's, have you thought about communications? Which is great because it was this broad subject. And the way that they taught it at my university was communications and its largest definition, with sub-subjects then where you could talk about in media and journalism, or you could talk about interpersonal communication, or you could talk about cross-cultural communication and organizational communication. And so I feel like it's just in my nature, if that makes sense. And then I can just see it replicated through the way that my career choices, my education choices, and the way that I think about and experience life today.
Yeah, it's really neat. And it makes me think too of the coaching that you do. Because
Yeah.
when I was starting to explore the work that you do, turning chaos into wins, working with startups, and I was reading through the results that you've had with clients, the type of work that you do, it was really about, to me, how you help people step back and see that big picture. And now, to use your word, like you help them step back and maybe see that interconnectedness of all of the things to then focus on where are we moving forward. Is that how you think about it for the work that you do as well, or would you describe it differently?
Yeah, I think maybe slightly differently because I think the possibilities come first. So it's
Mm,
like taking a step back and realizing there are multiple possibilities.
mm,
You may have currently chosen one path, but it's not the only path. There are multiple paths. And so being able to step back and reevaluate and say, okay, maybe this is still the right path, but to have those moments where you take that step back and just say, okay, I have new information now, a period of time has passed. And so let me check in now, knowing what I know now. Would I continue doing what I'm doing? Or is it time to make a different decision? And that can be in business or in your personal life. Because sometimes we just get stuck on this track and we're like, no, we have to, it's the end game. It's the end game. I have to make it to the end. And there's more than one way to get there. And what is it about this path that is maybe creating uncertainty or uncomfortability, frustration, friction? It's usually what's coming up is there's something that doesn't feel right.
mm.
Maybe they can't put a finger on it. And it's, again, that stepping back just allows for evaluation time instead of checking the next test to be done and just, I'm moving forward. That's good enough. Sometimes it isn't.
Yeah, yeah. In your coaching work with people, where do you see the resistance come in to stop and pause and do the reflection? Just like you and I were talking about before we
Yeah.
kind of hit record on this conversation for our own business. Like, where do you see that for your clients where they probably know they need to stop and pause and
Mhm.
reflect and step back, but what are the things that prevent them from doing it?
Yeah. It could be a few different things, right? It's everything from not feeling like they can take the time and digging into that a little deeper. It's not necessarily that the time isn't there. I think it's fear of losing momentum like that. And what does that pause mean? If I pause, then I think of it as like spinning plates. Oh, is plate gonna fall, right? Because I'm not running around and spinning everything and making sure that everything is moving. And then I think the other part is sometimes it's just like a lack of awareness where they're again in the momentum of things. They're caught up in the momentum. So it's the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that doesn't even come to their mind to hit pause. And so because it doesn't come into their mind to hit pause, they're not used to pausing. They're not even sure what that looks like. what that actually means to pause. It's like wasting time. It's like, okay, I'm not doing anything. I need to be moving. So it's this like anxious energy that keeps moving forward.
Yeah, I see that a lot with my clients too. Maybe not the ones who have never done it before, pause and reflect, so they don't know it's there, but more the ones who are yearning for that moment to pause and reflect, or they've tried to do it on their own and they don't exactly know how to do it well. But there's an intentionality to, I want to stop, I want to pause, I want to reflect, but the pressure of those spinning plates and moving forward, it's just this constant push and pull. Even if I sit down, I just get consumed by the fact that I am not looking at the spinning plates. Are there tools that you use, coaching in general, or other tools that mindfulness or assessments or ways to help people gain self-awareness or tools in their tool belt to stop that thought when they're in the moment?
For a lot of my clients, they're very heady, right? So many of our roles are in leadership. It's thought leadership. And so constantly trying to think of a new way or predict the next thing. And that's why it's easy to get caught up in this momentum. And so one of the techniques I use is to reconnect them with their physical body. Because it's a lot of nothing but walking them through a series. It could be breath work, it could be exercises as well, like mostly stretching than like physical exercise, because it helps with the connectivity. So a lot of the stretches are slow movement to be like, okay, move into this position, vertebrae by vertebrae, or like slowly, bit by bit, and really try to feel the sensation from the tip of your head down to the tips of your toes, and walk them through, how does your head feel? How do your ears feel? How does your neck feel? Yeah. And just help them reconnect with their various body parts as they're moving, to see, where do you hold this tension? Because a lot of it, then that's exactly, yeah, they're all walking around like this. I'm like, oh, I have a headache. I don't know why I have a headache. Well, how's your neck feel? Like, pretty tight. Yeah. Maybe we can try to bring those shoulders down a little bit and let it get a break. And finding these, it could be just a couple minutes where they can still, in a way, kind of think. It's hard to turn off the mind, but they start to get connected to their body and realize the physical sensations that are also coming up. And my clients relate to this, is because another topic that comes up is reactivity. And in my experience, a lot of times the physical sensations arise before the reaction moves forward. And so helping them connect to their physical body can help them start to regulate emotionally as they start to get into and feel those sensations as they start building within their body as well.
It's interesting how few people, I think, have an understanding of that. Like we don't learn that anywhere. I didn't learn that. I must speak for myself. And just through coaching, I'd say I'm at the very tip of the iceberg in terms of how much there is to learn and really practice with that. But even a little bit can make a big difference, just knowing, oh, this is a tool. For example, I was on a call yesterday with one of our coaches in the collective, and she said, like, how are you doing? And I always try to pause and actually think through the questions. I like paused and I was like, I'm good. Also, I'm like this. I feel like this. I was like, there's something in my body. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know what's driving it. And I'm not walking around like this. But I feel like that in my body. And I felt like that in my body for some time now. And I want to look at it and understand what it is and do something about it, because I don't want to continue to operate in the world where like, this is how I'm experiencing it. But so many people don't even have that awareness, to your point of, wow, that is really impacting not only your experience, but how you're operating in the world if your body is constricted like that. So
Yes.
I love it. I'm also curious, are people open to it? Do they fight it? I think I initially fought it. I'm like, no, I don't want
Uh,
to. I'm
yeah.
much too up here to like, you want me to think about my body? You want me to think about emotions? Get out of here with that stuff.
Yeah, I would say it's a mix. I've definitely have had clients that are open to it right away. Maybe they practice some form of meditation or yoga or something related that allows them to recognize, oh yeah, I know I feel better after I do that thing. And then there are others where it's new to them and they're like, yeah, that's a little weird. I'm not ready to do that. But I think part of our work as coaches too is seed planting. And even if that seed doesn't germinate from us working together in our sessions, it tends to further down the line. And so, more often than not, I do see it within our sessions. Then I'll bring it up again, and they'll be like, it's like that defeatist. Okay. Clearly, whatever I've been doing hasn't been helping me. So we have a safe space. Would you be open to trying it now? And then there's again this just okay. Let's just pause and sit in it. And there's just I'm just experiencing that now. There's so much beauty in that pause and sit in it, even though it's usually a very emotional moment. But it's like that moment where I can feel the fingers, even if I can't see them, but you know what I'm saying? Like we're white knuckling so much and and it's scary. And I think that's why it is emotional because that takes a lot, even if it's just in a short coaching session to be like, I'm gonna let go and trust and it's okay. I can do this here. But even if there's just like that glimpse of it, okay, that's progress. That's big progress because you weren't doing anything like that before. So I'll take 30 seconds.
Yeah. 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 That's interesting on the emotionality piece of it. And it makes me think about that it's not only the vulnerability of it, but it's like the honesty of it. Because you can cover up and put a band-aid on a lot of things, especially a lot of things that are up here. Like I can think something, feel something, say something else.
Right.
It's not true. But if somebody's like, where are you feeling that in your body? And whether you say it out loud or not, but if you turn in to look at it, you can't fight it. It's like, no, like my ears are hot. My
Yeah.
jaw is clenched. I have a knot in my stomach. My shoulders are like by my ears. My toes are tingling. Like it just brings that level of honesty that's hard to fight. And I bet that just unlocks things for people, even if they don't know exactly what it is
Yeah,
yet. Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
But I think it's that opening that happens that then allows for the work to be done. Because then we can start putting words to it, right? Like you said, just the fact that you can recognize, I feel it here.
Right.
Okay, let's name that. What's that called? Take it out of the heady conceptual space and make it very concrete and tangible. Even though naming and labels can be misnomers and not perfect and specific enough. I struggle with words, although like language is hard to
Mm.
really bring these feelings, sensations, emotions, especially to really describe them. But if you can get by proximity and just try to put names to it, then it's a bit like giving it its own identity that you can separate from yourself. So you can be like, I feel sad, but I'm not sad. But I can have the emotion and the feeling of sad.
Yeah.
And this can help with breakthroughs, whether it's emotional or otherwise as well. Just being able to be that, put specificity around it, separate it, and be able to look at it objectively, even if it's within.
Yeah. I'm having a moment where I'm feeling kind of surprised that our conversation went in this direction. I mean, we're two coaches, so not surprised in some sense, but surprised in the sense that like if I were an outside observer and I were to go and look on your LinkedIn profile or talk to, or even as we started the conversation to talk about the work that you do, of, feels like it's operational and it's execution and it's strategy and it's about getting results for a business. But yet still we came to this conversation around like looking inward as a piece of it. So I am curious to talk about the other piece of it. Like, how does it impact the businesses that you work with in terms of the results that they're either getting personally for themselves or professionally for the company? Like, do you just see it have massive impact, or yeah, walk me through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of the reason why you see that and it's intentional is many people start with the business, or career, right? They'll be like, I want to change careers, or I'm again having these challenges in business that I need guidance on. But as we talk, it's whether we want to admit it or not, we bring our whole selves to everything that we do. And so I'm a believer that our reality is a manifestation of what we project into it. And so if we're holding ourselves back, if we're not communicating, if we're pretending, okay, that's what is going to be projected into the reality and what will be reflected back. Right. And so I see this with businesses as well, of like, okay, we've managed to get to some level of success, but how do we break through to the next level, right? Or we're having communication challenges on the teams, how do I communicate better with them? And it is this bit of like, okay, well then reflect that back to yourself, and how are you moving forward? Then how are your teams moving forward? Because I would see my personal life also reflected in my business life.
Mhm.
It took me a while to realize that. And then I'd be like, oh, this is so bizarre. Like, how is this happening where I'm having a struggle here? And now I see another struggle, even though it's in a work context manifesting here, like that's crazy. So it took a while for me to see the parallels, but then I was like, oh, there's something to this. And so how can I use both as a learning opportunity that will then create the results I'm looking for? How do I find where those blockers are and how they're being realized and then work through? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I'm thinking back to, I don't know if it makes sense to the outside world, but I'm thinking to my coach training of, yeah, when you start to get at the root issue of something and somebody's starting to create their awareness around it, and then you ask the question, where else is that showing up in your life? Because to your point, it is often, especially if it's something that is a really deeper issue or a limiting belief or like a really bad habit or behavior, or like, I have this tension. Okay, I feel that in my business, but how am I walking around and doing that with my partner? How am I walking around and doing that with my kid? Of course, it's going to impact, but we might not see it in that way until we're confronted with the question to be like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
Now I can
exactly.
see the ripple effect of this one thing that seems like it's just this one little thing. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's beautiful to see as the work is done, how that then is reflected. And that's where I think the impact is much bigger than just in one area, if that makes sense. It's not just in business, but it's also on the personal, or it's not only in the personal, but it's also in business or career. I think it's helpful just to remind, like, coaching is not therapy, but there are crossover elements in the stance that there are things that you've been conditioned to do over your lifetime that is what's at the root of what you're working through today. And it could be like, I'm not good enough, or not having psychological safety. Most often it's like fear stem. And yeah, we end up talking about those things to say, okay, So who do you want to be? That may have been a conditioned part of yourself, but we can recondition to something new. So now you get to choose because that awareness is now present. If we go back to where we started of like lack of awareness and understanding of like, why is this happening to me? What's going on? And realizing what's your part in it. And now we've named it, and now we built some awareness around it. Now you can choose something different. And now it's not going to be like this. It took however many years to build this habit, but now we have the ability to choose and build a new habit towards this new way of being, which then again can be applied to the different areas of your life.
I like that you said people are going to come in to say, I need to solve this business problem, or I need to solve this career challenge, or maybe in some contexts it could be a personal challenge. But I'm thinking about, okay, if I look at what's something that you've helped people achieve or they're struggling with, they might come in and say, I don't know how to find product market fit, which is like so tangible, so business.
Yeah.
But to this conversation we're just having, it's okay, but if you're trying to solve that problem from the thinking cap, the analytical cap of, okay, let me just look at all the external data. But if you don't look inward to say, the reason I can't find product market fit is because I have a limiting story or a limiting belief about what's possible for this business, or I have a limiting belief about identifying a particular customer because I'm intimidated by that customer. You're never going to get there if you can't recognize, I'm going to continue to come up with it as excuses, or I love this phrase I heard recently, an escape hatch, to get every time I start making progress, I'm going to come up with some way to get out
Reason.
of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it isn't that kind of symptom. It's the deeper thing that needs to be issued with first.
And it's
Yeah.
not that every session like goes to this layer of depth, but when we look at the overall engagement, there are touch points into these moments. That's because we're building awareness, then they have that own aha moment. I'm coming back to the theme of trust, trusting yourself, trusting your team, trusting the organization, trusting your decision making. Yeah, it's all like related and reflected.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm looking at the time, so I want to be cognizant of your time. I have 1 million more questions, as I always do, but the one final question that's coming up for me is, as we're heading into the end of the year, this year is almost wrapping up. And so I don't know if you could take on one more project or one more client to work with, what could land on your lap where you're like, oh my God, that was like the dream project or dream client. It just would be so fun and energizing to work on.
Yeah, I really love working, especially with COOs, where right now in the environment, we're looking at still this pivot from growth at all costs to more sustainable, profitable business, and trying to manage those expectations with investors while also keeping the team on track, while also looking at the vision ahead. So those types of projects really excite me to work with those individuals, be there, the little ace in the back pocket to help these businesses make this pivot and succeed. It's not a snap of the fingers to go from struggling to profitability, but there are practical steps that you can take over time to change the culture of the organization and change the trajectory of the business.